A cold-hearted billionaire made her a deal. Marry me, give me children, then we part ways. He was still in love with his ex. The divorce papers were already drafted. But after the twins were born, everything changed. Something happened that made this powerful man fall to his knees. What could break a billionaire who'd never knelt for anyone? What could make him beg? And the real question is, after everything he put her through, after all the pain and betrayal, will she give him what he's asking for? Stay until the end to find out if some mistakes are too big to forgive, or if love really can be built from broken pieces. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, welcome to a place where we tell stories that don't just entertain, they transform. And to my beautiful subscribers, thank you for being here. Your support means the world to me. Before we dive into today's story, let me say a quick prayer for you. May every burden you're carrying become lighter today. May the doors that have been closed in your life swing wide open. May love find you when you least expect it, and may you have the courage to fight for what truly matters. May peace replace your anxiety, and may hope replace your doubt. In Jesus' name, amen. If you feel that, go ahead and hit that subscribe and like button right now, and also share this story. And if you've ever wondered whether love can survive betrayal, you need to stay until the very end of this one. Now let's begin. Damien Ashford signed his marriage certificate the way other men signed business contracts, with a steady hand and an absent heart. The ink was still wet when he realized what he'd done. Not the marriage itself. That had been inevitable. His family had pressed the requirement upon him with the weight of generations. The Ashford name needed heirs. The legacy demanded continuation. At 34, he'd exhausted every excuse. His father had delivered the ultimatum over breakfast one cold Tuesday morning, his voice as sharp as the knife cutting through a steak. You'll marry Damien, or you'll watch everything we built go to your cousin. Simple, final, non-negotiable. So Damien had chosen Maya Sterling. She stood beside him now, in her ivory dress, a vision of quiet elegance that would photograph beautifully for the society pages. Maya was a literature professor, intelligent, composed, with kind eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. She carried herself with the grace of someone who'd learned early how to hide her feelings. Most importantly, she understood the terms. He'd laid them out over dinner at Marcello's, an upscale Italian restaurant where the lighting was dim enough to hide the absence of warmth in his proposal. I need a wife, he'd said. No preamble. No pretense. Someone to build a family with. Children, carry the name forward. I can offer you security, comfort, respect. He'd paused, meeting her eyes. What I can't offer is love. He'd expected her to throw her wine in his face. Instead, Maya had set down her fork with careful precision and asked simply, why? Because my heart is already gone, he'd answered honestly. Given away to someone who didn't want it. I have nothing left to offer but the practical things. She'd studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face for something he couldn't name. Then she nodded once. I understand. And after the children are born, will we part ways civilly? You'll be provided for. Always. The children will have both parents in their lives. But the marriage itself will end. Then I accept. He hadn't asked why she would agree to something so cold, so transactional. Perhaps he hadn't wanted to know. Now, standing at the altar of the cathedral his family had attended for generations, Damien watched the officiant's mouth move without hearing the words. The vows were traditional, heavy with promises he knew he wouldn't keep. Love, honor, cherish. He said them anyway, his voice steady and empty. When it was Maya's turn, he finally looked at her. She was beautiful in a way he hadn't let himself notice before. Not the flashy, demanding beauty that had destroyed him 5 years ago, but something quieter, stronger. Her hand trembled slightly as she held his. He felt a flicker of something that might have been guilt. She deserved better than this, better than him. But she'd agreed, and he was too hollowed out to care about nobility. I now pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss was brief, appropriate, meaningless. The guests applauded. His mother wept tears of relief. Maya's family smiled with an uncertainty that suggested they knew something was wrong, but couldn't name it. Have you ever entered a situation knowing it would hurt you, but did it anyway? That's exactly what Maya did. And what came next would test her in ways she never imagined. The reception blurred together in champagne toasts and congratulations. Damien shook hands, accepted well wishes, and played the role of grateful groom. Maya did the same, her performance flawless. They moved through the crowd like actors who'd rehearsed their parts, but never connected to the material. You look happy, his best friend Marcus remarked, though his tone suggested he knew better. I'm married, Damien replied. It wasn't an answer. When they danced, Maya fit perfectly in his arms. The right height, the right rhythm. Everything is technically correct. But his mind wandered to a different woman, a different dance, a different life he'd almost had. The memory was acid in his chest. You're thinking about her, Maya said quietly. Damien flinched. I'm sorry. Don't be. You warned me. Her voice held no accusation, which somehow made it worse. I went in with open eyes. Why did you agree to this? The question escaped before he could stop it. Maya's smile was sad and knowing. Because sometimes we accept what's offered, even when we deserve more. Because I'm tired of being alone. Because maybe I hope that time might change things. It won't, he said, hating himself for the honesty. I know, she whispered. But hope is stubborn. The song ended. They separated. Damien watched her walk away toward her family, her posture perfect, her heartbreak invisible to everyone but him. Their home became a museum of almost everything. Almost touched. Almost spoken. Almost loved. The morning after their wedding, Maya woke to an empty house. Not empty of people. The staff moved through the halls like well-trained shadows, but empty of Damien. His side of the bed hadn't been slept in because he'd never come to it. She found a note on the kitchen counter, his handwriting sharp and hurried. I had to leave early. Coffee is ready. Not good morning. Not see you tonight. Just a fact delivered like a weather report. Maya poured herself coffee and stood at the window overlooking grounds, so vast she couldn't see where they ended. This was her life now. This silence. This distance. This careful choreography of two people sharing space, but never truly meeting. The weeks that followed established a rhythm as predictable as it was hollow. Damien left before dawn. She'd hear his footsteps on the stairs, the soft click of the front door, the engine of his car fading into the distance. By the time she came downstairs, he'd be gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of his cologne and an empty coffee mug in the sink. So Maya began waking earlier. She learned how he took his coffee. Black, no sugar, exactly 3/4 full so it wouldn't spill in the car. She learned he preferred his shirts pressed with extra starch. That he sorted his mail into 3 piles before reading any of it. That he ran his hand through his hair when he was stressed. She taught him the way an archaeologist learns ancient civilizations through careful observation of artifacts and patterns. Never direct contact. She set his coffee out every morning, exactly how he liked it. She made sure his clothes were ready. She left small notes with his things. Have a good day, or don't forget your meeting. Tiny attempts at connection that he never acknowledged. But he noticed. She could tell because the coffee was always gone. The notes always touched, even if never answered. Mrs. Ashford, Elena, the housekeeper, said one afternoon, finding Maya reorganizing the study for the 3rd time that week. You don't need to do all this. We have staff. I know, Maya said, dusting a shelf that didn't need dusting. I just want to be useful. Elena's expression was kind and pitiful. You're his wife, not his servant. But what was a wife without a husband? What was a marriage without connection? Maya didn't have an answer, so she just smiled and kept cleaning. Can you imagine loving someone who treats you like furniture in their own home? This was Maya's reality, and it was about to get so much worse. Damien returned after dark, usually around 10 or 11. Maya would wait, telling herself she was just reading or watching television, not listening for the sound of his car. When he finally came through the door, she'd look up with a smile that felt more like a mask every time. How was your day? Fine. Yours. Good. And that would be it. The extent of their daily conversation, delivered like strangers in an elevator. Some nights he'd sit in his study until she fell asleep. Other nights he'd go straight to his room. On rare occasions, he'd stop by the living room where she waited. "You don't have to wait up," he'd say. "I know," she'd reply. "I wanted to." He'd nod, uncomfortable with her kindness, and disappear upstairs. They had dinner together 3 times a week, a schedule suggested by his mother, who'd started asking uncomfortable questions about their marriage. Those dinners were performances, carefully staged productions where they discussed safe topics. The house, the weather, plans for the holidays. "We should host something," Maya suggested one evening, pushing food around her plate. "Your family, maybe. A dinner party." "If you want," Damien said, not looking up. "I thought it might be nice to have people here. Make it feel more like a home." He finally met her eyes. "It's not going to become a home, Maya. It's just a place we live." The words landed like stones. She nodded, swallowed, forced brightness into her voice. "Of course. I just meant." "I know what you meant." He stood, dinner half finished. "I have work to do." She ate the rest of her meal alone. When she cleared the table, she noticed he'd barely touched his food. The staff whispered. Maya pretended not to hear, but the words filtered through anyway. "Strange marriage, this one. He treats her like a guest. Poor thing, all alone in this big house." Her mother called every week, her voice bright with forced cheer. "How's married life, sweetheart?" "Wonderful," Maya lied, staring at the empty seat across from her. "Damien is very kind." "Kind." Her mother caught the word. "Not loving? Not happy?" "He's good to me, Mom. That's what matters." But lying to her mother was easier than admitting the truth. She'd married a ghost of a man who was haunted by someone else. The nights were the hardest. Damien would come to her room twice a week, punctual and predictable as a doctor's appointment. He'd knock softly. She'd say, "Come in," even though it was his house, his right. They'd fulfill the clinical requirements of their arrangement, creating the children they'd agreed upon, performing the biological necessities of their contract. It was mechanical, transactional, void of everything that should make such moments meaningful. He was gentle, at least. Considerate in the way one might be considerate of a stranger. He'd ask if she was comfortable. She'd say yes, even when she wasn't. They'd finish, and he'd leave almost immediately, mumbling something about needing to shower or work or sleep. He never stayed. She never asked him to. Afterward, Maya would lie in the dark, feeling more alone than she'd ever been before marriage. At least when she'd been single, the loneliness had been honest. This was something worse. The loneliness of lying next to someone who would never see you, touch you with intention, want you for more than function. One night, after he'd left her room with his usual quick exit, she finally broke. She cried into her pillow, muffling the sound so no one would hear. She cried for the girl she'd been who'd believed in love. She cried for the woman she'd become, who'd settled for this hollow imitation. She cried because she'd known what she was agreeing to, and somehow it was still worse than she'd imagined. The next morning, she woke early and made his coffee exactly how he liked it. Because that's what she did. That's who she'd become. 3 months into their marriage, his family threw them an anniversary dinner. Small, intimate, just close relatives who all pretended not to notice the chasm between bride and groom. "You two look so happy," Damien's aunt cooed, touching Maya's hand. "We are," Maya said, smiling until her face ached. Under the table, Damien's leg rested miles from hers. He laughed at jokes, told stories, and played the perfect host. But he never touched her, never looked at her with anything beyond polite acknowledgement. When they got home that night, Maya poured herself wine and stood in the kitchen, still wearing her dress, still holding the smile that felt carved into her face. Damien loosened his tie, heading for the stairs. "That went well, did it?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. He paused, turned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." She set down her glass. "Do you even see me, Damien? Or am I just furniture to you?" His jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "Fair." She laughed, bitter and exhausted. You want to talk about fare? I make your coffee. I will prepare your meals. I wait for you even though you've never asked me to. I smile at your family and pretend we're happy. I let you into my bed, and you left before I could even catch my breath. Her voice broke. I'm trying, Damien. I'm trying so hard. And you look at me like I'm an obligation. You knew what this was, he said quietly. I told you from the beginning. I know. The fight drained out of her. I know you did. And that's the worst part. I have no right to be upset. I agreed to this. She wrapped her arms around herself. But knowing something intellectually and living it are different things. I didn't know it would feel like drowning. Damien's expression flickered with something. Guilt, maybe. Or discomfort. Maya, forget it. She waved her hand. I'm just tired. Too much wine. I'll be fine in the morning. She walked past him, heading upstairs to the master bedroom that had never felt like hers. Behind her, she heard him sigh. But he didn't follow. Didn't call her back. Didn't do anything but return to his study, where he'd sit alone, working or pretending to work, until morning came. The charity gala was the kind of event Damien normally avoided. Too much small talk, too many cameras, too many people who wanted something from him. But his mother had insisted, and Maya had agreed to go, wearing a midnight blue gown that made her look like she belonged in paintings rather than his hollow life. They arrived separately, which had become their norm. Lisa with a forced smile, Damien with practiced indifference. They stood together for photographs, her hand resting lightly on his arm, both of them performing for an audience that believed in their lie. You look beautiful, he said, because it was true and because it cost him nothing to say. Thank you, she replied. And he heard the sadness underneath the gratitude. The ballroom was crowded, music flowing from a live orchestra, champagne circulating on silver trays. Damien guided Maya through the crowd, introducing her to people whose names he'd forget by morning. She was gracious, charming, even better at this than he was. I'll get us drinks, he said, needing space from the suffocating press of bodies. That's when he saw her. Natasha Reed stood near the bar, a vision in scarlet, her dark hair cascading over bare shoulders, her smile as devastating as he remembered. She was laughing at something a man beside her said, but her eyes were scanning the room, hunting. They found Damien. The world tilted. 5 years collapsed into nothing. He was back in the apartment they'd shared, watching her pack her bags, listening to her explain why he wasn't enough, why his love wasn't enough, why she was choosing someone else. I need more than what you can give me, she'd said, her voice soft and final. I'm sorry, Damien, but I have to think about my future. She destroyed him systematically, completely, without mercy. He'd spent 2 years rebuilding himself into something harder, colder, less vulnerable. He'd convinced himself he was over her. But now, watching her walk toward him through the crowd, he realized he'd been lying. Damien Ashford. Her voice was honey and smoke. It's been a long time. Natasha. His voice came out steady, which felt like a miracle. I didn't know you'd be here. I'm back in town. Divorced, actually. She said it casually, sipping champagne, her eyes never leaving his face. Turns out money isn't everything. Who knew? The irony wasn't lost on him. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, the same one she'd always worn. You look good, Damien. Successful. I always knew you would be. You left me because I wasn't enough. I made a mistake. She said it simply, like she was commenting on the weather. I thought about you often. I wondered what would have happened if I'd stayed. I'm married now. He said it like a shield. I know. I saw the announcement. She glanced across the room where Maya stood talking to another couple, graceful and alone. Does she make you happy? Damien should have lied, should have said yes and walked away. Instead, he said nothing, and his silence answered everything. Natasha's smile turned knowing. Have coffee with me tomorrow, just to catch up. We were friends once, before everything else. Can't we be friends again? I don't think that's a good idea. Please. She touched his arm, and the contact sent electricity through him. One coffee. What's the harm? Everything, he thought. The harm is everything. All right, he heard himself say. One coffee. When he returned to Maya with drinks, she was studying his face with an expression he couldn't read. You saw someone you know? She said. It wasn't a question. An old friend. The woman in red. She followed his gaze to where Natasha stood, watching them with barely concealed interest. Yes. She's beautiful, Maya said quietly. She's in the past. But the way he said it, the slight catch in his voice, the way his hands tightened on the champagne glass, Maya heard the truth underneath the words. That night, lying in their separate beds, neither of them slept. The coffee meeting turned into lunch. Lunch turned into long drives where they talked about old times, old dreams, all the what-ifs that had haunted Damien for 5 years. Natasha was different now, or pretended to be. Softer, more vulnerable. She said she'd been wrong, that she chased the wrong things, that she thought of him constantly. I ruined the best thing I had, she whispered one afternoon, sitting in his car in an empty parking lot. I've regretted it every day since. Natasha, I know you're married. I'm not asking you to leave her. I just needed you to know that I loved you, Damien. I still love you. She kissed him before he could respond. And God help him, he kissed her back. The affair began like a fire, quick, consuming, destructive. Secret meetings became routine. He'd invent reasons to be away, craft excuses that grew more elaborate with each lie. Leave her, Natasha whispered one night, tangled in sheets that smelled like betrayal. We could start over. Do it right this time. It's not that simple. Why not? You don't love her. He didn't argue, because it was true. Soon, he said, which was its own lie. Let me figure things out. At home, Maya felt the change instantly. He stopped drinking the coffee she prepared. Stopped noticing the small things she did. His eyes, which had been distant before, now looked through her completely. She found a receipt one day, folded in his jacket pocket when she was taking clothes to be cleaned. A restaurant they'd never been to together. 2 entrees, wine, dessert. She stared at it for a long time, standing in his closet, breathing his cologne-scented air, understanding finally that she'd already lost what she'd never really had. That night when he came home, she was waiting in the living room. Who is she? Maya asked quietly. Damien froze in the doorway. What? The woman in red. From the gala. That's who you've been seeing, isn't it? He could have lied. Part of him wanted to. But he was too tired, too hollowed out by guilt and desire and self-loathing to craft another story. It's not what you think. Then what is it? She stood, facing him across the space that felt like miles. Tell me what to think, Damien, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're having an affair. We agreed this wasn't about love. You knew my heart was gone. To someone in your past, not someone you're actively choosing over me. Her voice cracked. There's a difference between mourning what you lost and betraying what you have. What do we have, Maya? Really? A piece of paper, an arrangement. You said to yourself you have no right to be upset. I said I have no right. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. She wrapped her arms around herself. I knew you didn't love me. I accepted that. But I thought we had respect. Basic decency. The bare minimum of partnership. Was I wrong about that too? Damien ran his hand through his hair, stressed and cornered. It just happened. Natasha came back, and I couldn't help it. Natasha. Maya repeated the name like it explained everything. The woman who left you. The ghost you've been mourning. She comes back and you just forget I exist? You never really existed to me. The words hung between them like knives. Maya's face went pale. She nodded slowly, absorbing the blow with the grace she'd learned to wear like armor. Thank you for your honesty. She walked past him, heading upstairs, her back straight and her heart shattered. Damien stood alone in the living room, listening to her footsteps fade, and wondered when he'd become the kind of man who destroyed good women for the sake of ghosts. But the next morning, when Natasha called, he answered. The nausea started as a whisper. Maya blamed it on stress at first, the kind that comes from watching your marriage disintegrate in slow motion, from knowing your husband spends his nights in another woman's arms. She'd wake at dawn feeling her stomach turn, rush to the bathroom, and emerge pale and trembling. Are you all right, Mrs. Ashford? Elena, The housekeeper asked one morning, finding her gripping the counter. I'm fine. Just tired. But tiredness didn't explain the dizziness. Tired didn't explain why the smell of coffee suddenly made her gag. Tired didn't explain the tenderness in her breasts or the way her clothes felt tighter despite eating less. She knew, on some level she'd known for weeks, but acknowledging it meant confronting a truth she wasn't ready to face. Damien's phone buzzed constantly now. He didn't even bother hiding it anymore. Text messages would light up his screen while he sat across from her at breakfast, and he'd smile at his phone with more warmth than he'd ever shown her face. Something funny? She'd asked once. Just work, he'd lied, not even looking up. She'd watched him type back, his fingers quick and practiced, and knew with absolute certainty that whatever he was writing had nothing to do with work. He took calls in other rooms now, his voice low and intimate, saying things to Natasha he'd never said to his own wife. Maya heard fragments sometimes, passing by closed doors. I miss you too. Tonight, if I can get away. She doesn't understand me like you do. That last one had made Maya stop outside his study, her hand pressed against the wall for support. She'd wondered if she should storm in, demand he stop, fight for a marriage that had never been worth fighting for. Instead, she'd walked away. Because what could she fight for? He'd never loved her, never pretended to. She'd entered this knowing the terms. And now those terms were simply being fulfilled in the cruelest way possible. The morning she finally made the doctor's appointment, Damien had left without saying goodbye. His car pulled out of the driveway before dawn, heading somewhere that didn't work because it was too early, heading to someone who wasn't his wife because that's where he always went now. Maya sat in her car in the medical center parking lot for 20 minutes before gathering the courage to walk inside. Mrs. Ashford, the nurse, called her back, smiling with professional warmth. What brings you in today? I think I might be pregnant. The test was quick. The confirmation quicker. Congratulations, the doctor said, pulling up the ultrasound screen. You're about 10 weeks along. Let's take a look and make sure everything's developing well. Maya lay on the table, gel cold on her exposed belly, watching the screen with detachment. She should feel something. Joy, fear, anything. Instead, she felt numb. The doctor moved the wand, studying the screen with focused attention. Then she smiled. Well, this is a lovely surprise. You're having twins. The word hit Maya like a physical blow. Twins? Yes. See here? The doctor pointed to the screen. 2 heartbeats. 2 perfectly developing babies. Congratulations, Mom. 2. Not 1 life she was bringing into her broken marriage, but 2. 2 children who would grow up watching their parents coexist in silence. 2 children who would learn that love was optional, that marriage was a transaction, that home was just a building where people lived separately under the same roof. Are you all right? The doctor asked, noticing Maya's expression. Yes, sorry. Just surprised. She forced a smile. Happy surprise. But driving home, her hands shook on the steering wheel. The test results and ultrasound photos sat in her purse like evidence of a crime she'd committed. What had she done? What was she doing? Bringing children into a marriage that was already dead, already buried under lies and affairs and mutual indifference. She thought of her own childhood, warm and full of laughter, her parents still holding hands after decades together. She'd wanted that for herself, for her children. Instead, she was creating the opposite. By the time she reached home, she'd made a decision. She'd tell Damien tonight. Maybe the babies would change things. Maybe the reality of fatherhood would wake him up, make him see what they could build together. Maybe. Hope, that stubborn, stupid thing, flickered back to life. She prepared his favorite meal. Roasted chicken with herbs, garlic potatoes, fresh vegetables. She set the table beautifully, lit candles, put on a dress that still fit her changing body. She waited. Damien came home late, looking distracted and disheveled in a way that told her exactly where he'd been. You're home, she said, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. Yeah. He barely glanced at the table. What's all this? I made dinner. I thought we could eat together. Actually talk. He checked his phone, always his phone, and sighed. Lisa, I'm really tired. Can we just... I'm pregnant. The words came out blunt, graceless, nothing like she planned. But she couldn't hold them anymore. Couldn't wait for the perfect moment that would never come. Damien froze. Slowly, he looked up from his phone. What? I'm pregnant. 10 weeks. Twins, actually. 2 babies. She watched his face carefully, looking for something. Joy, fear, connection, anything. Instead, she saw surprise, then calculation, then a smile that didn't reach his eyes. That's wonderful news. Is it? Of course. He crossed her, and for a moment she thought he might embrace her, might show some genuine emotion. Instead, he kissed her forehead. Brief, distant, meaningless. Congratulations. Congratulations? She stepped back, staring at him. Damien, we're having children. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means everything. It means we fulfilled our agreement. He was already checking his phone again. This is good. This is what we planned. We planned a family, not a transaction. Isn't that what this has always been? He met her eyes finally, and she saw nothing there. No warmth, no connection, just empty acknowledgement. I told you from the beginning what this was. Why are you acting surprised? Because I'm human, she said, her voice breaking. Because I'm carrying your children, and you're looking at me like I'm reporting quarterly earnings. Because even in a loveless marriage, there should be something, some shred of decency or care or basic humanity. His jaw tightened. I do care. Then show me. Please, just once. Show me that I'm more than an obligation to you. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt maybe, or recognition. But then his phone buzzed and his attention shifted. He glanced at the screen and his expression softened in a way it never did for her. Natasha. It had to be Natasha. I need to take this, he said, already walking toward his study. Damien, we need to. We'll talk about the pregnancy later. Make doctor's appointments. Figure out what needs to be done. He paused at the doorway. Really, Maya? It's great news. I'm happy about it. But the door closed behind him before she could respond, and she heard his voice turn warm and intimate as he answered Natasha's call. Maya stood alone in the dining room, candles flickering on the carefully set table, food growing cold. Her hands resting on a belly that held 2 lives she already loved more than anything. And she understood finally, with crushing clarity. She was bringing children into a home without love. She was creating a family with a man who barely saw her. She was building a future on foundations that had already crumbled. She sat down at the table and ate dinner alone, tears falling silently into her plate. Maya's pregnancy progressed in isolation. The morning sickness evolved into something constant and draining. Her body changed in ways that should have been celebrated, but instead felt like evidence of her loneliness. She bought maternity clothes. Alone. I attended doctor's appointments alone. Set up the nursery alone. Damien came to exactly 2 prenatal visits, both times arriving late and leaving early, his mind clearly elsewhere. He'd nod politely as the doctor explained the twins' development, ask perfunctory questions about Maya's health, and check his phone whenever he thought no one was looking. Your husband seems busy, the doctor commented after the second visit, her tone carefully neutral. He is, Maya replied, which was true in the worst possible way. The nursery became her refuge. She spent hours there, painting walls a soft cream color, assembling 2 cribs that wobbled under her inexperienced hands, folding tiny clothes that still smelled new and hopeful. She talked to her babies constantly, telling them about the world they'd be born into, making promises she hoped she could keep. You'll have each other, she whispered, her hands on her growing belly. Even if everything else falls apart, you'll have each other. Damien barely acknowledged the pregnancy beyond the practicalities. He transferred money for her expenses, asked occasionally if she needed anything, stayed in his study or away from home entirely. The affair with Natasha escalated in proportion to Maya's pregnancy. He stopped even trying to hide it now. Lipstick on his collar, unfamiliar perfume, late nights that turned into early mornings. He'd come home looking guilty and satisfied, and Maya would pretend not to notice. One night, Natasha called the house phone. Maya answered, her belly heavy with 6 months of pregnancy. Is Damien there? Natasha's voice was sharp, entitled. The voice of a woman who didn't care about the wife. He's not home yet. Tell him I called. Tell him it's urgent. Of course. Maya said softly. May I ask who's calling? A pause. Then he'll know. The line went dead. Maya sat with the phone in her hand, staring at nothing, feeling something crack inside her chest. The other woman was calling their home, demanding her husband's attention. And Maya, pregnant, tired, alone, was reduced to taking messages like a secretary. When Damien came home an hour later, she was waiting in the kitchen. Natasha called for you. His face paled. Maya, I can explain. She said it was urgent. I told her you'd call back. She kept her voice steady, emotionless. She knows about the house phone now. Should I expect more calls? I'll talk to her. Will you? Maya laughed, bitter and exhausted. Or will you just keep doing what you've been doing? Sneaking around, lying, pretending I don't exist. This isn't the time. When is the time, Damien? After the babies are born? After you've gotten what you wanted from me? When exactly do I get to matter? He ran his hand through his hair, stressed and cornered. You're being emotional. I'm pregnant and abandoned. She stood, one hand supporting her lower back. Natasha wants you to leave me. That's what she called about, isn't it? She's giving you an ultimatum. The silence confirmed everything. And what did you tell her? Maya pressed. I told her I needed time to figure things out. Figure out what? We had an agreement, Damien. Children, then divorce. You're just moving up the timeline. Why not admit it? Because it's not that simple anymore. Why not? He gestured helplessly at her belly. Because you're pregnant. Because I can't just leave you like this. So you're staying out of guilt? She felt tears coming and hated herself for them. That's what's keeping you here. Obligation to your unborn children. What else did you expect? The question hung between them like poison. Nothing, she said finally. I expected nothing. And you've delivered exactly that. Congratulations. She left him standing in the kitchen, climbed the stairs slowly, her body heavy with more than just pregnancy weight. The day it happened, Maya was in the nursery. She'd been hanging curtains, standing on a small step stool despite knowing she probably shouldn't. But the nursery needed to be perfect. Her babies deserved perfection, even if nothing else in their lives would be. The dizziness came suddenly. One moment she was reaching for the curtain rod, the next the room tilted. She didn't remember falling. Elena, the housekeeper, found her 20 minutes later. She'd been bringing up laundry when she heard a thud from the nursery, followed by silence. Mrs. Ashford, Elena called, pushing open the door. Maya lay crumpled on the floor, one hand still reaching toward the curtains, her face pale against the cream carpet. The step stool had tipped over beside her. Oh God, Mrs. Ashford. Elena dropped the laundry and ran to her, checking for a pulse, with shaking hands. Stay with me. Please stay with me. She called emergency services. Then Damien, her voice high with panic. Damien was at lunch with Natasha when his phone rang. I need to take this, he told her, seeing the house number on the screen. Can it wait? Natasha was irritated. She'd been pressing him about leaving Maya, about starting their life together, about choosing her finally and completely. It's the house. So your housekeeper can handle whatever it is. But something in Damien's gut twisted. He answered. What is it? Mr. Ashford, it's Elena. It's your wife. She collapsed in the nursery. The ambulance is coming. She's breathing, but she won't wake up. The babies. Rob was standing before Elena finished. I'm on my way. What's wrong? Natasha demanded. Maya collapsed. I have to go. Damien, you always have to go. When are you going to choose me? He stared at her, this woman he'd destroyed his marriage for, this woman he'd convinced himself was worth the betrayal. And suddenly she looked different. Not beautiful, not alluring, just selfish and shallow and completely wrong. Not now, Natasha. He left her sitting there, abandoned mid-meal, and drove to the hospital with his heart hammering in a way he didn't recognize. Fear. Real, genuine, bone-deep fear. The hospital was cold and bright and smelled like antiseptic. A nurse directed him to a room where Maya lay hooked to monitors. Her face so pale she looked like a ghost. 2 separate monitors tracked heartbeats. The twins, still alive, still fighting. Mr. Ashford, a doctor, approached. Your wife experienced a severe stress-related collapse. Her blood pressure is dangerously high. The pregnancy is putting enormous strain on her body, but there are signs of severe emotional distress as well. Will she be all right? Physically, we believe so. But Mr. Ashford, I have to be frank with you. Your wife is carrying twins while under extreme stress. If this continues, we could lose the babies or lose her. She needs rest, peace, and support. Whatever is causing this level of anxiety needs to stop. Damien stood in the hospital corridor, watching through the window as Maya lay pale and fragile, with monitors tracking 2 heartbeats and 1 breaking heart. And he wondered when he'd become a man he didn't recognize. Maya woke to find Damien asleep in the chair beside her bed. It was wrong somehow seeing him there. His tie loosened, his hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. He looked younger in sleep, more vulnerable, almost like someone who cared. She shifted slightly, and he woke immediately. You're awake. Relief flooded his face. How do you feel? Like I fell. Then panic seized her. The babies. They're fine. Strong heartbeats. The doctors are monitoring them constantly. He leaned forward. But Maya, you can't keep doing this to yourself. The stress is dangerous. She wanted to laugh. The stress. As if it was some abstract force, and not the direct result of his betrayal, his abandonment, his choice to love. Someone else. I'll try to relax, she said instead, too tired to fight. The doctors kept her for observation. Damien stayed the entire time, canceling whatever he had planned, ignoring the constant buzzing of his phone. Natasha, probably demanding explanations, demanding attention, demanding everything he'd been giving her freely while his wife nearly died. You should go, Maya said on the second day. I know you have things to do. Nothing's more important than this. Since when? The question landed like an accusation. Damien flinched, but didn't argue. What could he say? That he'd suddenly remembered she existed? That guilt had finally broken through his selfish fog? On the third day, the doctors delivered news that changed everything. Mrs. Ashford, I'm afraid we need to induce labor. The lead obstetrician said, her expression serious. Your blood pressure isn't stabilizing, and we're concerned about both you and the babies. They're developed enough to survive outside the womb, and at this point, the safest option is to deliver them now. Now, Maya's hand went to her belly. But I'm only 34 weeks. I know this isn't what you planned, but your body is under severe stress, and continuing the pregnancy could be dangerous for all 3 of you. Damien reached for Maya's hand, the first time he'd voluntarily touched her in months. Whatever keeps you safe. She looked at their joined hands, his holding hers with a grip that felt almost desperate. All right. Labor started slowly, then accelerated into pain that eclipsed everything else. Hours blurred together in a haze of contractions, monitors beeping, nurses speaking in calm tones that belied the urgency in their movements. Damien stayed. Through all of it, he stayed. He held her hand when the pain peaked. He wiped sweat from her forehead. He whispered encouragement that sounded like prayers. Maya was too exhausted to question it, too focused on the overwhelming work of bringing her children into the world. You're doing beautifully, he said at one point, and she almost believed he meant it. I'm scared, she admitted, squeezing his hand hard enough to hurt. I know, but you're the strongest person I've ever met. You can do this. The word surprised her so much she almost stopped pushing. When the first baby arrived, a boy, small and red and perfect, Maya heard Damien make a sound she'd never heard from him before. Something between a gasp and a sob. It's a boy, the nurse announced, placing the tiny body on Maya's chest for a brief moment before taking him to be examined. He's beautiful, Damien whispered, his voice thick. Then the second baby came. A girl, even smaller than her brother, crying with fierce determination. A girl, the nurse said, smiling. And she's got a strong voice. They cleaned both babies, while Maya lay exhausted and trembling. Damien stood between the warming tables, watching the nurses work, his face a mask of wonder and terror. When they finally wrapped the twins and brought them to Maya, she was crying. "Here's your son," the nurse said gently, placing the baby in her arms. He was so small, so perfect. Dark hair, eyes barely open, fingers curled into tiny fists. Maya looked down at him and felt her entire world shift. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "I'm your mama." Then they brought her daughter, and Maya cradled both of them, one in each arm, and understood with absolute clarity that she would die for these children. She would endure anything for them. She would survive this broken marriage, this heartbreak, this impossible situation, because they needed her to. "Would you like to hold them?" the nurse asked Damien. He looked terrified. "I don't know how." "We'll show you." "Come on, Dad." Damien approached slowly, like the babies might break. The nurse positioned him carefully, then placed the boy in his left arm and the girl in his right. And something in Damien Ashford, something that had been dead for years, suddenly came alive. His son looked up at him with unfocused eyes, and Damien felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders like armor. His daughter made a small sound, and Damien felt his heart crack open in a way he hadn't known was possible. These were his children, his blood, his legacy. But more than that, they were real, human, dependent on him entirely. And in their faces, he saw Maya's strength, her grace, her quiet endurance of everything he'd put her through. "They're perfect," he said, and started crying. Not elegant tears, not quiet ones, but real, ugly, overwhelming sobs that he couldn't control. He stood there holding his children, crying for the first time in years, feeling the full weight of what he'd done and what he'd almost lost. Maya watched him from the bed, exhausted and confused. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "God, Maya, I'm so sorry." The nurse gently took the babies back, sensing the moment needed privacy. She settled them in their bassinets and quietly left the room. Damien sank into the chair beside Maya's bed, his head in his hands. "I nearly killed you. All of you. The stress, the affair, the way I've treated you. The doctor said your collapse was from emotional distress. I did that. I almost destroyed our entire family because I was too much of a coward to let go of the past." Maya said nothing. What could she say? He was right. "I ended it with Natasha," he continued. "That night you collapsed. I called her from the hospital and told her it was over. She called me a coward and a fool. She's right. I'm both those things." "Why?" Maya asked quietly. "Why now?" "Because holding them," he gestured to the bassinets where their children slept, "I finally understood what matters. Not some fantasy of what could have been with Natasha. Not my pride or my pain or my stupid inability to move on. But this. You. Them. The family you've been trying to build while I've been tearing it apart. I don't know if I can forgive you," she said honestly. "I'm not asking you to. Not yet. Maybe not ever." He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since they'd married. "I'm just asking for the chance to be better. To be the husband you deserved from the beginning. The father they need. However long it takes. Whatever it costs." Maya turned her head to look at her sleeping children, her babies, the two lives she'd brought into the world despite everything. "What are their names?" she whispered. Damien moved to stand beside her, looking down at the twins. "Whatever you want. You've earned that right." And it was such a small thing, giving her the choice after taking so many choices away. But it felt like something. A beginning maybe, or at least an acknowledgement of everything he'd failed to give before. "Noah," she said, looking at their son. "And Grace." Damien nodded. "Perfect. They're perfect names." That night, while Maya slept and the twins dozed in their bassinets, Damien sat between them in the dark hospital room. He watched their tiny chests rise and fall, listened to their small sounds, and felt the full weight of fatherhood settle onto him. He'd built companies. He'd made fortunes. He'd achieved everything his family expected. But none of it had prepared him for this. None of it had taught him how to be the man his children needed, the man his wife deserved. They came home from the hospital to a house that felt different. Damien carried Grace, while a nurse helped Maya with Noah. The babies were so small, still fragile from their early arrival, requiring constant care and attention. The nursery Maya had prepared alone suddenly became the center of their universe. Damien surprised them both by refusing to leave. He'd taken leave from. This is the end of part 1. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel if you have not subscribed. Tell me where you're watching from in the comment section, and stay tuned for part 2 coming up soon. May God bless you for watching.